case building time is up. Hi everyone, congratulations for making it to the semifinal rounds of SECT-G 2021 debate competition. My name is Justin, I'll be your chair for the round. Before starting the round, I'm gonna allow my panels to introduce themselves. Ka Angga and Ka Hanto.
Hi, my name is Agga and my gender pronouns is he or they.
Hi everyone, I'm Angga, will be your panel for this round. My gender pronunciation is he or him. Thank you and good luck.
Great, thank you, Ka Angga and Ka Hanto. Before starting the round, I think I would like to deliver several things. First of all, the maximum speaking time is 7 minutes and 30 seconds. I won't be writing anything after that. I will put the time on the chat box like 1, 6, and 7 and 7:30. But I also highly encourage yourself to also time yourself so that you don't get lost in the middle of your speeches. And before you do your speech, please do check if you're audible. Please do mention your preferred gender pronoun, if any, and mention your preferred POI method. Either you want to do it through, unmuting or do it through chat. If you don't mention anything, then we'll assume that anything goes. Right, we'll be debating under motion number 3. Oh yeah, sorry, before that, I also want to ask, do any of you not consent to be recorded? Because this debate is about to be recorded. If any of you do not consent, please don't hesitate on sending your non-consent to the chat. Okay, opposition consent. Proposition, do you consent?
Yeah, we are consent.
Okay, so both team consent, yeah. So this debate will be recorded. Great. So we'll be debating under motion number 3. And without further ado, I call upon the Prime Minister. Here.
Hello, am I audible? I'm sorry, I think it's not going.
6.
Okay. Is it clear and loud?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Oh, so I don't have any preferred genders, and my POI preference is on chat. So, okay, let me set my timer first, and I'll just start the round. Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Judge, I have 6 arguments and I will just directly jump in and have 2 sides, first in the principle and secondly in the practical. And firstly, in the principle, why is the harm of self-immolation, right? In Tibet, there are monks that are killing themselves. They're sacrificing their life by burning themselves, and that is for nothing. As Dalai Lama, who is also the leader of Buddhism in Tibet, we believe that the right action that he should take is to aggressively denounce this kind of action, right? And secondly, as a point of clarification, denouncing means that he is going to actually stop the monks in Tibet from doing such actions and tell them to stand with their stance in another way. We believe that by sacrificing and killing yourself, just have the China government to demolish you and Buddhism without having blood of their hand. And secondly, why China is really humble actor. Firstly, China has been trying to take over Tibet by using force, right? They are a strong government with superpower, and doing those and by doing that kind of things does not affect the China in any way. Violence has already existed in Tibet, right? Mass demonstration for the people as well as the human rights violence exists. Government also the government Tibet also have doing this kind of thing. So we believe that by doing this kind of killing yourself, sacrificing yourself will not affect the China at all, because like this kind of things already exist under status quo right now. And also, secondly, the international community has given that issue the international to actually boycott this kind of action over the military violence that has existed there. And additional sacrifice is useless, right? Because even if we can see how in the case of Uyghur Islam, for example, being held in camps, they will still don't care about international boycott, right? How is sacrifice yourself going to make them suddenly want to stop that take away Tibet? Tibet, right? Under both sides of the house, betterment towards the condition on the worst case is never gonna happen. But the trade-off then looks like Tibet monks still alive and those at the house. So we believe that under the house we still better because we have we can show to the people that we can still stand with our we can still stand in our stance with with another way. Doesn't need to kill yourself or sacrifice yourself. We believe that this kind of thing is better. And thirdly, why are they actually practical? Why this will demolize Buddhism faster, right? Dalai Lama and the whole Buddhist incentive is to share our value, right? And the only way we can do it is when the monks are alive and can be able to preach. Dalai Lama, as a considered leader in Buddhism, must actually stop more monks from killing themselves, right? Because Buddhism also works in monarchy, where leader can coordinate the monks. We believe that it is actually the right action that he must take to actually stop this kind of killing that can actually like even demolish the Buddhism at all and can also make China achieving their goal, which is to get rid this kind of Buddhism, right? We believe that this kind of thing is actually efficient, and this kind of thing is actually a benefit to actually like stand of our Buddhism, right? And fourthly, China government does not care and give you any sort of sympathy when you kill yourself. This is clear, right? Because considering in the status quo, the government is even willing to actually use military force to control the people in Tibet, right? Like they are not going to care when you kill yourself or etc. They will thank you even for willingly kill yourself. It is exactly their goal. Like also, and notice how under this of the house, they are just going to actually let innocent monks burn their stuff and just for to conduct a protest that has existed in the status quo. They are already like mass protests. I have told you they are already mass protests for the people, for the government in Tibet itself, and also monks can also protest in another way. They doesn't need to killing yourself, it doesn't need to harming yourself, that can just actually contradicting your Buddhism value at all. We believe that will not actually like by protest in another way that will not include harming Buddhism in Tibet, right? Like for example, like saffron protest in Myanmar or etc. Right? This kind of thing is actually effective to use rather than killing yourself or sacrifice yourself for the protests that even are not cannot actually result in the good way at the outside the house. And also in the practically, why this can actually create worse Buddhism, right? All right, suicide is not allowed from the very first place, right, in Buddhism, especially when you as monks who should preach on how to achieve Nibbana, for example, but you demolish yourself to attempting suicide, which is a non itself. Suicide is never justified in Buddhism, right? We can see in the case of Buddha Gautama, for example, who tried to harming himself and cannot even achieve Nibbana at all, right? Because in the Buddhism, this is not only a bad for the monks, but they will not actually achieve Nibbana. They will not actually achieve what Buddhism goal at the end of the day. They will not achieve, and that's the question becoming: why do you becoming a monk in the first place? That when you are killing yourself at the end of the day, when you are not achieving any Nibbana, for example, why do you becoming a monk for the first place? This kind of thing is actually not effective by killing yourself. It will not actually like achieving any Buddhism goal at the end of the day, right? And notice how if they are a monk, meaning that they are truly the core of Buddhism, right? And their main goal, which is Nibbana, right? And also we believe that because they are not attached towards materialistic, we believe that this kind of thing is actually benefit at the end of the day. And thirdly, what does this mean? The monks want to stand for the Tibet people, right? By setting themselves on fire as a form of protest. But the problem is that killing yourself only help the Chinese government in further demolishing the people in Tibet, for example. It helps the China even get rid the Buddhism and also demolishing the people in Tibet even more. We believe that there's no way of this monk to be able to counter the Chinese government, and this is just not the way to do it, because we believe that there's another alternative that is even more effective to do it, rather than you just killing yourself that can directly achieving the China's goal. China's goal is just to get rid the Buddhism and to actually like control and also own this kind of Tibet. By you killing yourself, by you actually like killing the Buddhism or etc., you are erasing the Buddhism value. It will just make the China even thank you, because you are willingly give the Tibet land for them, because you are killing them even more. And also why it will actually harm the people in Tibet, right? Majority of Tibetans are Buddhists, right? And they are monks as they see monks as their role model. When they see you killing yourself, some part of the people will think that it's the right thing to do, right? But this is not only the case. There are two sides of the story, right? First, a huge part of them is going to say that you are contradicting Buddhist value. In Buddhism, you are not allowed to kill yourself, right? And it's just going to make you more inconsistent. And because in Tipitaka, they already clear that you are not allowed to kill yourself or suicide, etc., right? And you are not allowed to harming yourself in Pancasila Buddhist, etc., right? And secondly, some people are going to follow you by attempting suicide because it's to extend that it's actually bad, and because they see you as a role model, they will actually following what you do. They will just following what because they consider monk always do the right thing. When they see monk doing suicide or harming themselves, they will say, "Oh, I will just doing suicide, so I will just can have the Tibet or etc." This kind of thing is actually a bad action that we should not take. And we believe that as Dalai Lama to aggressively denounce this kind of action because it will just harming the Buddhists at all, and we just harming the people of Tibet at the end of the day. We believe that as our side of the house, we have a lot of people and we are not going to harming them. We are so proud to propose this motion.
Thank you, PM, for that speech. To open the case of opposition, I call upon the leader of opposition. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're.
Okay, just going to set my own timer. Okay. Minute. Okay. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you what side government wants. Side government wants that all the Tibetan people, especially those of the Tibetan monks, to actually stay in China's rule forever, to don't have human rights, to cannot, for example, exercise the religion freely, to cannot exercise their religion and spread their religion more, and to actually have their leaders to actually support them. That is what side government wants. They want this Tibetan to be oppressed by this powerful Chinese government for forever, right? This is something we don't want. That's why we are giving you a better case for Tibetans. So moving on to our stance. First, we support as Dalai Lama, we support the Immolation Act by the monks. And second, we think this support will be at the form. We think this support will be at the form of official statement and giving mainstream media attention like social media. The goal is united front and having a Tibetan acknowledgement by the CCP. So at least if we can't, we have media attention. The problem. So moving on to my rebuttals. They said that China don't care, right? Exactly, China don't care because China is too powerful on your side. Because only protest in the current status quo, which you defend as Dalai Lama on your side, it just doesn't work. Because Dalai Lama is also not there to organize any movement. And China is basically having a stronger military presence than Myanmar in Tibet itself, after decades of, for example, military buildings within those areas, right? This is why only protests and only being alive and keep like this kind of like peaceful protest wouldn't work because China isn't afraid of that. This is why China don't care under your side. But second is about Tibetan Buddhism. I told you Tibetan Buddhism is different than Buddhism, right? Because basically they are not the typical Buddhism that you have or we have. Like they do not actually, for example, believe in Siddhartha Gautama and those kind of things. They have their own religion. This is why they elect the Dalai Lama himself as the chosen one, right? Different from other religions. And also, I think one thing we can agree as all religion is that when you can actually sacrifice for yourself at the name of goodness, at the name for the betterment of your people, that's the moment when you can actually get to, for example, to heaven, right? To reincarnate. That's when your God do actually recognize you as a good individual within your religion. What exactly, especially when you're fighting for your religions, what is that? So moving on, again, third rebuttals. What exactly are the harms of China towards Tibet that warrants this behavior? 3 reasons. First, historically speaking, look at Uyghur, who hundreds of thousands of people forced into reintegration camps, forced to forsake their religions and culture, become Chinese slaves. We think that is a precursor to what happens under mainland China to not only Uyghurs, but also Hong Kong, Taiwan's, and Tibetan people. Because now that we characterize the Chinese government authoritarian, to combat it, of course, we can't use gun or diplomacy. We have to use radical movement. Second, they kidnapped the Dalai Lama, forced him to exile, and crowned a child as new Dalai Lama. This is direct insult towards Buddhism in Tibet and the Tibetan population in general. We think that when dealing with the government that has no respect for religion, we need to show commitment as someone who is actually a monk and who is actually a religion, a symbol within and helpers within this religion. Third, tens of thousands of Tibetans already killed, displaced, or hurt by the Chinese government because they know we can't fight back. So we will use the only way we know, that's to say radical movements. And tens of thousands of Tibetans already, and this is why we do actually propose this rebuttals this way. So moving on to my first justification on why is this principle justified? 3 reasons. First, China take over and rule. Premise: China invaded Tibet in 1960s and rampaged a whole country's sovereignty from the people and disposed the leader they trusted away. That's to say Dalai Lama. Right? Replaced them by a fake child Dalai Lama to basically to gain the trust of the people. Right? We think this is not just like a direct insult to the Buddhism and the religion, but also on how China is itself. Just imagine, ladies and gentlemen, if someone from other countries just come into your countries, invaded and kill many of your citizens, and even like force your own leader to get away, what do you feel? Of course you will feel angry, right? Of course you will fed up towards those certain government, and you have the revolutionary idea to fight back, right? And also on how not just take over, but China rule itself is even so cruel, right? And if, for example, on how basically they kill thousands of Tibetans who fight for their own nationalisms and their religions, and even placing Chinese residents of Tibetans. No, thank you. That's the moment you know the Chinese government doesn't trust you, and also how their rule is basically an entrenchment of your human rights. This is why we need to actually have a more revolutionary fight. Second, the practice of self-sacrifice and non-violence have established as a successful revolt in history. This looks like, for example, Gandhi in the 1930s India against the British government of a 3-month hunger strike, and hunger to gain independence. Hunger strike done by women's suffragette movement 1900 in the USA to get votes, and teacher strike of not working and protesting in the US for demanding teachers' rights in the current status quo. We think on how this all of self-sacrifice and non-violence of movement have already historically proven of successful in the ground, and so do this. Third, urgency. The Hong Kong and Uyghur is already on the reserving, right? It's also in a reservation. Is surfacing, right? Within how the current status quo have already showed us that this is the moment also for us as a Tibetans, as also Dalai Lama, as a monks, to actually fight for our independence, to actually fight for our human rights, right? Because they are also fighting for their human rights and religion, right? This is the moment when you can stand together to fight this fear-mongering Chinese government who didn't respect our human rights, who didn't respect our religion. This is why we think this is the right momentum. But moving on to my second argument on how do we propose a better movement. Ladies and gentlemen, premise: recognizing in the current status quo, China is covering up information inside Tibet, where the perimeter is guarded by strict military force and only several journalists can enter from outside, right? So we didn't really know and only propaganda from the Chinese government that can actually allow, for example, CCTV in this nation. Which didn't really actually give you any kind of actual information of their suppression, of the current situations of the Tibet. So we don't know of what happening inside. Maybe Chinese is actually oppressing them. Maybe their human rights are being ripped away, right? This is why we're so actually this is why we are basically don't have any options left, right? But also second, on their side, by Dalai Lama aggressively denounced this practice, because there is no strong and united front that in this movement. The self-sacrificing monks and followers of Dalai Lama will be split in 2 different ways on how each are fighting and other ways created a non-stronger movement against Chinese government. But and how do we solve this problem? It's because self-sacrification, right, is actually historically successful recourse, like viral videos and those kind of attracting media attention from outside. Within this actually created two benefits. First, immediate attention. Let me tell you, one thing that China is afraid of is because they are in the peaceful rise. They don't want to let nations to actually don't, for example, to lose investments from other nations, to actually don't to get sanctions from international human rights committee or from UN, for example. By giving these into, for example, in Twitter, to actually promoting this about, like, for example, BLM in Hong Kong, who gains huge movement in social media. We think how we create a better status quo on our side. This is why we're so proud to propose.
Thank you, Leader Up, for that speech. To continue the case of proposition, I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister here.
Hi, is my voice clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Give me a couple of seconds. Thank you. I'm going to start in 3, 2, and 1. Sorry, I clicked the wrong thing. I'm going to start in 3, 2, and 1. Opposition come here and tell you that they want to solve the whole conflict using radical movements and using violence and etc. But we also told you that the current radical movements and demonstrations have already existed in the status quo, or else why would the Chinese government want to shoot people out of nowhere the moment when they're demonstrating? It is exactly because those demonstrations has happened and those kind of radical movements that they want has already existed in the status quo. It has been covered by media around the world, international committee, as well as the United Nations, but it still happens. Why? And this additional murder and additional suicide is not going to create any means of a difference because it still already happened. The whole spotlight has already been there, and we believe that since it's not been changed, the current status quo, the Chinese government do not even care, then that means that the whole benefit of them saying that they're going to solve this conflict is not going to exist anyway. Opposition said that they don't want Tibetan monks to be oppressed. Yes, we also don't want that. But why does it have to be in a way of killing yourself? There are significantly other ways. And since we were also proved to you that the international community and media has been doing so many ways to actually cover this story and tell the international community about the human rights violations that's happening there, then exactly the kind of betterment that they want to achieve will also be achieved under our Save the House. It does not have to be the way that Tibetan monks, setting themselves on fire. We can also create headline news that uses this kinds of monks to create viral media. For example, when Tibetan monks can also coordinate themselves and go to have a meditation in the middle of the road. That kind of thing will also create the same impact and create the same benefit that they can also achieve under their side. It will create a viral news. It will also create the kind of attention that they want. We don't see why that it has to be in the form of suicide, right? They say that they want Tibetan unification and media attention. We get that. They tell you that peaceful protests are not going to work, but we also tell you that we don't care if peaceful protests are not going to work. There has been violence protests in Tibetan. For example, the way that Tibetan governance has already also been attacking the governance and the military power from the China's. China's military power. So we believe that that kind of conflict, that kind of attack and radical movements has already existed in the status quo, and it's already been covered by news. Please read some news, team opposition. Here's a contradiction. They want them to continue to do this, but they also notice that they want the whole conditions to be better. But we don't understand how the condition is going to be better the moment you, as the Chinese government, is that cruel, right? They told you that know that when you kill yourself, you are continuously decreasing your power. You are simply killing your own supporter, and you're killing all of those monks that can actually speak up as more of a people. The moment you have less people, you have less power, you have less people to demonstrate, and that also means that you're not going to have that much support. And we believe that with that decrease of the support, it's not going to help you, because exactly what they want is radical movements, radical demonstrations. What happens when the monks already burn themselves and die? No one is going to create radical movements anymore, at least on their side. It's going to be something sustainable, right? Why will there be international sanction that will make the world scared of you? Because inherently, China is a global superpower. Countries also need them, and they cannot afford to have international sanctions against them. And if they even want to talk about that, what's the difference with having media coverage and about human rights violations up in China, and the difference that it makes with another added news about the monks burning themselves? Inherently, the difference is going to be not significant, and it will also not be worth it towards the trade-off that they want, which is the lives of these monks. Exactly, because they say that China is so cruel, they are going to frame your sacrifices as legal suicide. Notice that you are burning yourself on fire instead of having the military's bullet shot onto your head. Notice that these two problems is going to be framed in different ways. For example, the moment you are going to throw rocks onto the police, and then the police shoots you, then that is going to be frame as news. For example, in headline news, military office shoots the people, the demonstrants that are demonstrating in Tibet. But what happens on the other side of the house? The headline news is going to be Tibetan monks demonstrating by burning themselves. Then inherently, there's not going to be any mistakes done by the military themselves. The government can easily frame it because they control the media, right? They can just simply say, oh, the monks wanted to kill themselves. We never created any violence towards you, so it's their choice. It's not even a human rights violation. It's their inherent consent and choice. So we don't understand why then the international community is going to be that much deprived out of this information that they're just suddenly going to cut off all their trade deals with China, and suddenly China is just going to be scared. That is lack of analysis and a logical link that we need the second team opposition to told to us, right? Note that in Buddhism, there's no such thing as okay and killing yourself for religion, but the moment they are doing it willingly, when there are other ways, for example, the way that we told you, other radical ways of demonstrating, then that means that essentially they're not going to achieve their goal anyway. But even if they do, then it's going to harm the people in Tibet, because they no longer have these monks that can be able to spread them the same value that they wanted. They're not going to be these people giving them and providing them with the support as a community, a Buddhist community in the first place. But before that, do we have any POIs from team opposition? I guess they also agree to our case. Therefore, that just shows you, Judge, that they also concede that under their side, they're significantly just sacrificing life for, in the essence of nothing. But also, I'm going to move on to my clash and prove to you why then, on our side, we win this debate. First of all, under radical movements, we prove to you it has existed. But even if it has not existed, we are going to ask the leader of the monks, prove to you and make a radical movement as Dalai Lama. We can be able to coordinate using social media, like they said, right? Because essentially, they said that they want to create these news, but if they also say that the media is controlled by China, we don't see why the news about monks burning themselves inside of China is also going to be known by the international community. So we're just going to assume that on both sides, the social media is still going to exist, even though it's going to be limited, right? They are going to be coordinations. This Dalai Lama can tell them what not to do, what kind of demonstrations you can do, or even without Dalai Lama, Dalai Lama only saying that don't sacrifice yourself, do it in another way. They can also create radical movements, for example, like meditating in the middle of the street, or giving blessings towards the military police and creating news headlines, right? So we believe that it is not important. And second of all, even if Dalai Lama is at fault, he can also create the same kind of information and the same kind of coordination that they want under their side of the house. Because under their side, notice that they're simply telling people to suicide without any real value and benefit. Notice that people also get tired of it. The moment you see monks suiciding every single day, you are simply having this kind of image that the monks and the Buddhist monks in Tibet are actually giving up on you. So we believe that that is not going to have any significant impact or benefit that can only exist on their side of the house, and it will even be better on their side. Proud to oppose.
Thank you, Diallo, for that PPM for that speech. To continue the case of opposition, I call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Testing, am I audible?
Yep, you are.
Okay, thank you. Give me a minute to set up timer. While I'm setting up timer, my gender pronoun is he or him. My POI preference, just unmute yourself and talk to the mic. And I'm going to start my speech in the count of 3, 2. Okay. Well, Mr. Checks, I think there's a few clarifications that needs to be made on side opposition. Firstly, we don't think that it's murder. The fact that opposition is coming, I'm sorry, the fact that government is coming here to say that it's murder is precisely they're wanting characterizations of undermining China's harm towards the Tibetan people by saying that the monks actually are getting murdered, that somehow it's our fault as the Dalai Lama that these people are killing themselves. Like, we think that there's a bigger picture here that I'm going to explain later on, but also more importantly is that monks that do self-immolation are logical people, right? They took the harms and they agree with the risk, right? They knew they are monks, right? They dedicated their life to Buddhism. So we think they knew what they're going to happen at the end of the day. But more importantly, and secondly, is that China has more guns, they have more people. As a minority, how do you fight back? We characterize this under 2 parameters. Firstly, you need sympathy and empathy. And secondly, you need to show solidarity that you are strong and cannot be broken, right? We don't think that it's going to be efficient when you do protests, especially against an authoritarian government like China, who has shown that they will do violence, they will do media narrative in order to suppress your movement. So before I move on to the rebuttals, firstly, let's attack their model, right? They say that firstly, the status quo is ineffective, that there are currently so many radical movements in Tibet. Yes, we concede to the fact, but right now, there's no endorsement from the Dalai Lama. We think that on our side, when we have the support of international figure like the Dalai Lama, from our leader directly saying that, for example, that he is in solidarity with our movement as Buddhist monks to do self-immolation, that's going to be way more effective, it's going to gain way more media attention, then it's actually going to be a threat to the Chinese government, precisely because the Chinese government feared Dalai Lama to the point that they had to exile him, they cannot kill him, and they had to replace him. Secondly, they say that protests will work. 2 things here. Like, firstly, about peaceful protests. We characterize the media as actually wanting to sensationalize everything. Like, what do you think they will pick? Monks self-immolation or just monks peacefully praying? We think that under those 2 things, that there's our side will be more highlighted by the media. But secondly, about the violent protest. Like, exactly, we get shot. And when we get shot, we die. And the worst part is that the Chinese government is going to pin us anyway as radical people who doesn't want law and order. At least on our side, when we burn ourselves, it's going to garner sympathy. It's going to garner empathy from fellow Buddhists inside China. But thirdly, we actually would reduce supporters. We say that no, thank you, later on. they said that we will actually reduce supporters. We said that no, we think there's a very clear urgency right now about COVID and also about the urgency of people and the overreach of China. But secondly, let's attack their principle. Like three things here. Firstly, I think that since our first speaker that we have clarified that this is an active motion, that Tibetan Buddhist is actually different from conventional Buddhists. Like I think that they are more clearer toward urgency, that they are more clear toward the practical of achieving changes to their people, right? Because to them, they see thousands of their own people die every single day or every single month, precisely because of the threat from China, from them getting starved by China, from them getting suppressed by China. We think that those are something that are clearly different from conventional Buddhists that can have the privilege of pacifism. But secondly, let's characterize Dalai Lama. He's a major international figure, right? He has support from major presidents from 4 different eras. That's going to be very significant. But more importantly, that he is someone who grew up in Tibet. Do you think that he will stand by and let China do its thing and just stay silent and say that actually I'm going to condemn this movement that's going to actually threaten China? No, we think that it's more likely for him to actually show solidarity later on and actually support this movement. But lastly, what is your goal? Right? You want Tibet to gain and not to gain. You want actually Tibet to have its own independence, right? To not get overreached by China. But what actually you're going to achieve on your side is just the status quo. It's just going to actually create more division within the Tibetan Buddhist movement and actually create more division, and that division will be used by the Chinese government to actually subjugate you as a nation. So moving on to my arguments, 2 things I'm going to bring today. Firstly, why do we want to support a radical movement? Because they're going to paint, because we admit that this is going to be a radical movement, but why then do we think that this is something that we should support as the Dalai Lama? 3 layers. Firstly, that there's a consent and urgency. I characterized this previously, but at the current moment, even China is preventing us, Tibetans, from getting things like food and medicine, right? Especially during COVID, where they're going to die, right? Where we are going to have a lot more urgency, right? That we think that the urgency right now is not only to do peaceful protest and have a sustainable movement, but rather to actually get help as fast as possible, as fast and urgent as possible. Right? And also that, of course, it's going to have to happen to monks that consent to being self-immolation, right? They do it themselves. We're not actually peer pressuring them or anything like that. Secondly, sympathy and empathy from Chinese Buddhists. Like, we think that's likely to happen precisely because they are fellow Buddhists, and that even though our lines are different, that there are similarities between our suffering, and that they themselves can recognize that the government actually don't appreciate religion to an extent. So there's going to be internal factors that are going to be present and is going to oppose the Chinese government to a certain extent on our side. But thirdly is about media attention. Like how media attention is actually scaring China. For example, take a look at Hong Kong and their democracy movement. When they grew radical, when they grew violent, it precisely is the only way that you can fight back against China. And they're going to say, oh, wait, that actually happened right now, but it's not going to work. Yes, that's the movement. Like, that's the point, that we need to become more radical to an extent, but not to an extent that we can actually gain more media attention to a point that China will actually say that, oh, this is going to scare China to an extent that's going to be very effective. But moving on to my second argument, why is it with a united front we can push back against China? 3 reasoning here. Firstly, we consolidate our supporters. People who are supporting Dalai Lama, the higher ranking monks, for example, and then we can show a united front towards facing the Chinese threat. We can have a larger base to not only do protests and strikes, but also show the global world that we are one, that we want our voices heard. Why is this good? Because sympathy, empathy, and oppressed minority fighting back against the Chinese threat. Are you kidding me? The media would sensationalize that. Like, forces opposed to China would support that. The US, for example, who can put pressure on China in the UN. But secondly, it's about sustainability. Like, it's very clear that right now Tibet is a fragile state, not only its environment but also about COVID and hunger, and expecting help from China is no more than a dream, right? And it's going to be not sustainable on your side precisely because we need aid to survive, right? There's not going to be a movement if none of us are going to survive this because of lack of food and medicine. Like, that's why you can see that yes, it's going to be more radical and it's going to be going to have a lot more death. But it's also precisely why we need media attention, so we can highlight and suffering and get some aid from the UN or WHO or other NGOs. But why is this likely? For 2 reasons. Firstly, because China is under global scrutiny because of COVID, and then secondly, they have global condemnation regarding their attacks on independent territories like Hong Kong and Taiwan. But lastly, does it solve the problem on our side? We say that yes, that the ideal situation is that when we show united front and get the media attention, we can actually halt China's advances and preserve Tibet independence. But even in our worst case, that if when we don't get any international media attention, at least we can consolidate our supporters, not only in Tibet, but also attract solidarity from those fellow monks in Chinese. Comparatively, on your side, we're going to die. We're not going to survive, that we're always going to be divided, that we are going to then be subjugated under China. And that is a way worse alternative that we would like to present here on side opposition, that we can handle our worst case, that under all these things, that we actually should support, say, self-immolation through consent and cooperation. So proud to oppose.
Thank you, DLO, for that speech. To close the substantive case of proposition, I call the proposition with you here.
Excuse me, I'm going to the toilet for a while first.
Yeah,
Is
okay.
that okay? Okay, thank you. Ta-da. Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay. Four biggest mistake coming from the opposition side of the house. Firstly, they told you how peaceful protest will not work, but they don't even prove to you on how suicide will work, when even when my PM has already give you the example of saffron protest, which works in 2007 in Myanmar, that brings betterment for all people in Myanmar, which most of the people in Myanmar is Buddhist. That is why then peaceful protest will work, and there's a solid proof. And also going on to the second biggest mistake, that they don't even favor in the concept of Buddhism, while we are explicitly talking about Buddhism, and they even harm the concept of Buddhism from the very beginning. And also thirdly, DLO told you about two things. He told you about, firstly, you need sympathy and strong and say that you are strong and cannot be broken. Exactly when you are suiciding, that already shows that you are broken from the very beginning. What kind of sympathy are you talking about from the very beginning? And also secondly, he told you about that there's not going to be food to survive. Excuse me, that happens under both sides of the house when their religion is in harm from the very beginning. People are mostly Buddhism in Tibet. People who are Buddhism will also protest when they see that their religion will be taken away from the very beginning. That is why then, if you are talking about the worst case of there's no food under your side of the house, there will be no food at all as well under your side of the house. Also going on to the fourth biggest mistake is that they keep on talking about consent. Even if they consider what they want to do, is that something strategic and good? No, that's not exactly our case, and they keep on dismissing about it. We don't care about consent from the very beginning. We can also get solidarity when Dalai Lama changes their method. We are not saying that under our side Dalai Lama is going to support Chinese government, but we are saying that Dalai Lama will be able to unite all of the Buddhist monks, and there will be still support for the Tibetans at the end of the day under our side of the house. And now going on, two things that I'm going to talk about in my speech. Firstly, about protest versus suicide. Second, about radicalism. First, about we told you how then at least by protest they can still live, that they don't harm the core value of Buddhism, and they still live and can exercise their religion. It is not about how just because China wants to remove Buddhism, then you will not be able to exercise your religion at all. You can still exercise it in the smallest way, such as reading parita in the morning, inside your home and your own safe place, which only take like 3 minutes, for example. That is why then you will still be able to exercise your religion as long as you still live. And going on, what they told you is how protests will not work, and you should just decide to attract attention. And this makes no thank you. This makes no sense for 3 reasons. A, it is not only about suicide that can attract the media, but protesting will also gain media attraction. Even they contradict themselves by saying that China strictly prohibit info leaking out, but also they say how they want to gain exposure. Excuse me, what is the process of how the info will leak to the media when China strictly no thank you. When China strictly don't expose the info. And also B, they told you how sacrifice yourself, you'll be in heaven. I'll prove to you why your next life will just be even more miserable. If you suicide, you owe it to your next life. You'll reborn in the lowest earth, which is Dugati Bumi, for example, and reborn as Fantasika or a ghost, simply because you are harming the stance of it is very hard to be born as a human, and being in Manusa Bumi is the only way for you to be able to achieve Nibbana, which you are among, and you clearly know about that. That is why then, when Dalai Lama is the one who is their guru, Dalai Lama should enlighten the monks to not waste their chance of being reborn in Dewa Bumi or Jana, which is a step forward to achieve their Nibbana. Even in Payasi Sutta of Digha Nikaya, contained within the Vinaya Pitaka, inside Sutta Parita, had already told you about self-harming is not allowed inside the religion itself. And also, even there's a proof that when Buddha Gautama tried to achieve Nibbana by harming himself, he cannot even achieve the goal. It is when he loosened the self-harm, that is when he could achieve the Nibbana at the end of the day. Even when we are not talking about Buddhists, let's just be charitable and not talk about Buddhist concept. When you wanted to sacrifice yourself, but your sacrifice would not bring any benefit at the end of the day, that is not even sacrifice. That is not even sacrifice. That is just being dumb and kill yourself. And you will not just be in heaven just because you kill yourself. Well, there's no benefit at the end of the day. And also, see, they talk about how international pressure will work. We told you that international pressure will not work at the end of the day, exactly because they told you how China is so cruel. Then there will be no sympathy when the Buddhist monk kill themselves, because the PM, the LO also told you about how then the China people had already killed so many Tibetan people in the street. Why then they care about the monk's life at the end of the day when they don't care about the citizens' life? And also going on that they also don't care about international pressure, simply because when you wanted to UN to interfere because of media, they don't care at all. Let's see in the case where because of Uyghur case in China, they got sanctioned. China got sanctioned by EU and US, but they still don't care because they are very strong and they don't care anything about the international pressure, about the sanctions, etc. That is why then we prove to you why international pressure would not work. This is probably the most possible argument coming from them, but it's already tackled down. And also, second thing about radicalism, we told you about we want peaceful protest, and they told you that they want people to burn themselves, saying that it could give sympathy. We question which side is more radical, burning yourself or peacefully protesting. Exactly, the one that is more radical is by burning yourself. That is just a radical act, just like the terrorists who wanted to suicide bombing. That is just the same parameter. That is why then we prove to you that under their side, it is just more radical under their side. And also, when it is radical, they will not be hurt even more, and it just justify the act of China wanting to remove Buddhism in Tibetan, because they have already proved to you on why then Buddhism in Tibetan is being radical at the end of the day. That is why then they cannot even achieve their goal at the end of the day. And how can you get supporters when everyone dies and suicides slowly, like what my PM already told you, that they see Buddhist monks as their role model, and they will just suicide as well. It is just too best case to simply say that NGO and UN will have the power to help, because they don't have the proof of government violating human rights at the end of the day. That is why then we are very proud to propose, and we champion this debate. Proud to propose.
Thank you for that speech, Prof. Whip. To close the substantive case of opposition, I call upon the opposition whip here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Thai government made no attempts to actually solve the deep-rooted problem. Instead, they have continuously mentioned this ridiculous jargon of happening in both sides, not mutually exclusive. And through all of their case, they have given zero effort to actually solve the problem of Tibet. I made 2 things in my speech. Number 1, rebutting their opposing points. And number 2, why even in the very worst case, we champion this debate. Rebuttals. 3 thing points that we have saw, but before that, Thai government is being very unclear with their case. Their PMN whip champion for protests without any form of suffering, with peaceful protests, how protests can occur without going in the way of danger whatsoever. And yet the rest of their DPM directly contradicts this layout that their PM has given by championing protests that does include harm, like throwing rocks at police. So at the end of the day, what do they actually want? They've been blurry with what form of protest at the end they actually want. So their end goal is actually completely discredited because of this fact. What is the logical link of human empathy from someone self-immolating? When you see someone killing themselves, harming themselves on purpose for a goal that when they witness their own people die to such an extent so that they want to kill themselves, it's unthinkable task. Of course, people will sympathize with you and empathize with these things that you are doing this extreme measure because of the sufferings you have witnessed. Number 1, on their turning point, principally self-immolation harms people, thus we should not encourage it. Why is it not this same? Number 1, they're harming themselves with purpose. Precisely the fact that they're doing this with an inherent purpose that is not just killing yourself for the sake of killing yourself. It's harming yourself for the betterment of your people. Number 2, even if it is violent, if it's self-harm today, these monks never directly harm anyone else. So he posits that it's not this extreme form of violence to such an extent of aggressive denunciation, which is completely different what they compare it, where they compare it to murder and suicide bombings and terrorism, where self-immolation, you are only harming yourself. You're harming anyone else for your own purposes. Number 2, self-immolation is ineffective and protest, thus it should not be related to self-harm. Why is it not the case? Number 1, do you honestly think that when the nation of India harmed themselves by going on hunger strike, when college students go in the way of gunfire in Swarto area, they will knowing that they will be harmed or killed, or when Myanmar protesters go in the way of the military, more oppressed by the government, knowing that they can be killed, when the military is aggressive, do you honestly think that protests should never be about self-harm? Precisely the essence of protest is sacrifice. You sacrifice yourself by being in jail, by being more oppressed by the government, like in the case of Alexander Navalny. Also, the future of your nation can achieve a better life than you. So in the end, no matter how wrong or right it is, self-sacrifice to an extent will be needed in the case of protest, in the case of the fight for the future of your nation, of your religion, of your people. Thai government mentions how the status quo has never improved as a result of self-immolation. We posit the fact that without the massive attention right now, and happening that's not in the past, precisely the fact that the situation has never worsened, China has never been able to, and China has never completely taken over Tibet, is because these protests has been going on for countless time. But now, why is it actually fully effective now? Why is it actually fully effective now? Because precisely the fact that even if Chinese is an evil actor and they will never listen, if that were the case, then well, how did things like colonization end? We are at a critical time in history where Joe Biden, Boris Johnson, and other massive world leaders have created coalition against Chinese oppression. No, thank you. In the form of opposing Hong Kong, Xinjiang status, and status quo right now, and how the global community and the international people are being informed of these things. They're continuously reading about these things. They're being exposed to these things. So now, of all time, is the best time for protests, for big protests that attract the international attention. And we can make that what happened decades ago, when 10 times better and more influential. Well, when decades ago, a picture of a monk burning himself as a protest went viral globally. When this happened, global support skyrocketed. That monk became the international symbol of the Tibetan suffering, of the people suffering, how the Chinese has killed these people endlessly, giving them this actual tangible influence to fight back against Chinese influence. So their situation has become better. Lastly, even if China is this evil and unmoving actor that they have portrayed them as, the question will be, how then will Tsai government do anything? They simply mentioned that it will be better on their side. No, thank you. But the problem is, if they are this unmoving without international attention that we can provide, then how will Tsai government deter the Chinese attention and China's oppression that is infinitely more harmful than monks self-immolating that we are decreasing when we are giving attention towards these suffering in the form of self-immolation? Number 3, self-immolation harms the essence of Buddhism and is bad for the Tibetan public. Not the case. When as monks, as the leaders, you are self-immolating. You aren't just promoting this. You aren't just promoting suicide. If that's it, then why haven't the entirety of Tibet just been wiped off the map like that? Well, we posit that precisely the fact that when these monks kill themselves, they aren't just promoting suicide. They're promoting the fight against Chinese influence, impacting the public. Like if a monk that I looked up to as the public did this extreme act because they believe that it will harm Chinese influence, that the public will be actually impacted. They will continue his deeds by actually pushing back against China right now. Precisely the inherent difference when you stop being a normal civilian to a monk, a Dalai Lama, is when you show your commitment to your religion. So of course these actors specifically are justified to go to more extreme measures because they have, as a form of showing their dedication when they have become a monk, when they have become a Dalai Lama, leader of Buddhism. Dying for other purposes. Buddhism has this form of karma which directly supports this. Precisely when these monks and people that know that they die with this purpose, not just for suicide, for the sake of it, that it fulfills, but for their own people, for the sake of their own people, for providing attention, for the benefit of their own people, being selfless, that it fulfills the Buddhism concept of karma, of helping others and the form of reincarnation to a better being that supports their religion, increasing main solidarity. Lastly, Whip wants to unite the monks, but the question will be, how then will you unite the monks when they stay silent against oppression? When Dalai Lama condemns the things that the monks have done for decades, and you lose trust, no thank you, and you lose trust in the Dalai Lama, destroying the solidarity of these monks entirely. Lastly, why is it in the very worst case, side opposition still champions the debate? Why is it the worst case where China gains more influence, Dalai Lama betrays his supporters, and things are infinitely harmed on their side? For decades, supporters of Tibet, supporters of Dalai Lama has given their lives, has protested all because of what they believe in. And for Dalai Lama now to go back on these decades of encouragement will be the most grave offense he could ever principally do. Betraying those who hold him dear and has supported him and his cause in such an aggressive manner is the biggest form of betrayal, which will have tangible practicalities. We believe it is extremely hypocritical for Dalai Lama, someone who has been isolated in India for spreading religion, nationalism, and with extreme measures, for actually doing these extreme measures of spreading ideologies, to now go back on his deeds and even denouncing extreme measures and wanting peaceful protest. When this happens, you lose your integrity as an influence as a leader, significantly harming the integrity and solidarity of your people and the trust of your people for you. How will a leader of a people gain power, be successful, become a good leader when they can't even work out with their own people? Do you think Gandhi just stays idly as his supporters went on hunger strike? He joined, he supported him. So Dalai Lama, as a proper leader of a Tibetan monks, should never go back on what his people are actually doing for his cause, for what they say is for the good of their own people. He should be supporting them, which contradicts their very own principal values of side government. Why look at our worst case where we can still gain influence and not everyone in Tibet dies like how they portrayed it as? Why is this not likely? Precisely when there's an active endorsement and support of Dalai Lama, of someone that leads these people, is the fact that the unity of the power and influence of the Tibetan people will be as big as it has ever been. Precisely the fact that with the support and endorsement, people know that this is what their nation should do. No more arguing of their true purpose because their leader has united them all under one purpose, increasing their influence, increasing the solidarity, giving them more influence than they've ever had for decades when we actually actively support these sides of protest. Number two, why don't we all die? Do you honestly think that the millions of Tibetans right now are actively killing themselves? If that were the case, and the fact that this, then how you portray that this is going on for a long time, aside government portrays, then why hasn't everyone in Tibet died? They still exist and they still have influence precisely because it's only the most ascended monks and monks that do these acts to influence as many people as possible to encourage them to actually fight back against Chinese influence in many other ways. Lastly, what side government will do as the Dalai Lama, as the form of it, is to sit idly watching their people getting killed and just enjoying the scene, completely betraying the true purpose of the leader so proud to oppose.
Thank you, Upward, for that speech. To close the entire case of opposition, I call upon the opposition reply here.
Audible?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I'm gonna start my speech in the count of 3, 2, 1. Panels. Firstly, notice how they changed the narrative from saying that it's murder in PM and DPM. And when I pointed that out in my second speech, they would change it to saying suicide. Very subtle, but they realized that when you paint self-immolating monks as murder, it's exactly what China uses. It's exactly their narrative that they use, saying that these monks are crazy people who doesn't care about life that they're barbaric. Now think about it like this, right? Imagine if prop is the Chinese government. Their case suddenly makes a lot of sense. Like they don't address survivability and how to make it better because they want the people to die. They want to keep status quo where they can suppress protest, violent and peaceful, where they can cover it using their own narrative media. And they want the leader of the Tibetan Buddhism, the Dalai Lama, to condemn these actions and actually cause division. So it's easier for them to subjugate the Tibetans. They're very subtle, but they really do act like the Chinese government, and for that, it's really it's really good on their case. I mean, it's something you need to be praised about, right? Chef's kiss. So moving on to my speech, two things I'm going to talk about. Firstly, what are our exclusivities? Secondly, why do we provide a better model? Like, firstly, on our exclusivities, we think we're going to bring 6 things in this speech. Firstly, we brought the idea of international pressure. They said that it wouldn't work. Okay, but they never address my reasoning on why it will work. Like I mentioned 2 things. Firstly, about how China is currently in condemnation because of COVID, how they are facing a massive international pressure like never before. And that is precisely why we need to do it right now. And that they are also facing scrutiny for their actions in Hong Kong because of how they are advancing their Chinese imperialism agenda. Right? These 2 things are happening in status quo. And we also brought you the idea of urgency of COVID and how China blocks access, that we need to rely on international communities in order for you to get access, for the Tibetans to get access to these kinds of things. We brought you that idea, never rebutted. Secondly, we brought you the idea of empathy and sympathy, creating solidarity not only in the international community, but also from the Buddhists inside China and creating an active force, the same way that Americans had an anti-war movement during the 1960s where they are opposing the Vietnam War, right? That ended up being very effective. But thirdly, there is a very clear contradiction happening on side prop. 2 things. Firstly, that all their case hasn't been clear. What exactly do they want? How will they achieve it? The goal is to have a better movement, but they never clear to us how then we'll say global condemnation from the Lama relates to an actually practical and tangible thing that can somehow affect China. But secondly, the second contradiction they made is that they say that okay, on our side that this will never be covered, that's not going to be effective because China owns the narrative. But on their DPM, they say that this actually has been covered by international community, but it's not effective. So what exactly is the narrative that you're running with? That there is international community that covers this news or not? Please be consistent. Fourthly is about consent. Like we've told to you that there is a very different. They're very different here, right? It's not because consent is practically important, precisely because they are monks that want to do this by themselves, that they think about the harm, the benefits, precisely because the practicalities in their life has different, because they are living in suffering, that they are seeing people who they are supposed to protect suffering, right? That they have, that they are desperate, that they have to find a way out, and that this is the only way they know how. And as sad as it is to say, they're not wrong. China will never consent to peaceful protest and strike, and we pointed that out. Fourthly, and fifth, right, we mentioned that this is an actor motion, precisely because Dalai Lama is someone who is very closely related to Tibetan Buddhism, that he has a lot of influence. That's going to be very important if we get his support and his endorsement on this movement. But also, secondly, is about the Tibetan Buddhism, how they always do it, right? They always acknowledge, say that, okay, Tibetan Buddhism is actually similar to normal Buddhism. We said that no, there's going to be very different religion, right? Even the distance between Tibet and China is very far. Like the difference being is that they're going to be more focused on actually making change. That what you're saying about nirvana, etc., is actually on the lower standard, and that what they want is actually to be able to survive, to actually fight for their people, etc. Like, and lastly is about sustainability. Right? We mentioned that briefly, that it's about survivability and how you need access to food and medicine, etc. But lastly, why do you provide a better model? But number one is just precisely because their case is actually being very idealistic, calling that, because when the Dalai Lama condemned this, it's actually going to create a somehow better protest, for example, without any explanation. That for some reason their only case has always been about rebutting our case, saying that it will never work, this, etc., etc., but they never address their own worst case, and therefore we are so proud to oppose this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that speech of reply. To close the entire debate, I call upon the proposition reply here.
My voice clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. I will start in 3, 2, and 1. First of all, we are not contradicting our case when we said that we can use other methods if you want other radical demonstrations. We simply justified exactly why it can still happen without killing yourself, solidarity, etc. They're simply saying that it is okay for all Buddhists to conduct suicide using solidarity and die together at the end. Best case, dramatic, but lists a gigantic loophole. They changed their stance by framing us for all the harms simply a dear desperate move. Chef's kiss. Team opposition come here with their best case saying how they'll be able to solve the conflict in the United Nations and NGOs. Let's just say they can, okay? We also can. Their basis logic analysis of solving the conflict is literally media attention. We can also achieve it. It's not exclusive in any way. Notice that our case engages to both cases. What if, even if the government of China is inherently that strong, we can also achieve betterment? Why, on the best case, if China can be able to change and give the Tibetan people their independence, we can also create a better move. I'm going to prove to you this with a simple weighing. First of all, on the principle clash, right? On the consent, we don't care about consent after all. It's not strategic, and if it only causes harms under their side, we don't want it. Let me do weighing because the opposition team is simply unwilling to engage to the more modern case, right? What if China took power and the people failed in demonstrating? The monks still alive under our side. They can still preserve Buddhism even though they are not going to be able to tell people and teach people about it. At least it will still exist. And with more time, over time, with normalization and everything, the Chinese government is also going to be able to give moral freedom towards them the moment they are not constantly conducting these kinds of suicide. But under your side, that's not going to happen. People are going to kill themselves every day until the day that the Chinese government gives them independence, which reveals to you why the Chinese government is very, very strong, and it's unlikely for them to do so just because you conduct suicide, right? But what if the demonstration works? The monks dead under their side also because they already conducted suicide. At least under our side, without the monks killing themselves, without even fighting the military power and all of those governments, they can already be dead even before the military pulled the trigger. So we believe that under their side, the harms is going to be much more harmful. Because at least under our side, it is very much easier for the media to frame you as innocent. Notice on the practical plus, first of all, it is easy for the Chinese government to frame their innocence in two ways. First of all, I don't kill you. I never pulled the trigger. You kill yourself. Why am I wrong for that? Second of all, you're doing it willingly. You're setting yourself on fire. I'm just trying to solve the stuff that's happening in Tibet and say that they're innocent because you're simply just killing yourself. Even if the international media can say that, oh, it's actually their monks are dead there, they're killing themselves by setting themselves on fire, it is simply very, very easy for the Chinese government to simply say, oh, I'm not innocent, I never killed them, they set themselves on fire. And that's exactly what we see with the Uyghur people. The moment they built these camps and the Chinese government tried to say, no, it's not a camp that is used to make them suffer. It is simply a camp that is used to educate them. And that is the thing that's going to happen under this of the house. It's easy to really flame their innocence. But second, exactly because Dalai Lama is that powerful, we don't care. Even if he tells the monks in Tibet to stop suiciding, it will still work. Because if they say the monks suicided, for example, it will be divided, there will be no solidarity. For decades, it proves how they fail under their side. Another side, Dalai Lama will also under their side sit and look at how they die, the monks in Tibet being dead. So we believe that under our side, even if the whole harms about the Buddhist community not being able to stand in solidarity, it's also going to happen under their side because the monks are dead. But under our side, it's not going to happen simply because Dalai Lama is that powerful, right? According to their characterization, Dalai Lama will always be able to do what he wants and tell the monks what they want. So they're still going to stay solid. But also, third of all, why this great decrease of power? The monks, the more people dead, the more people will not be able to demonstrate. The more people will not be able to stand up against the government and attack the military power. So we believe that that's the kind of harm that only happens under their side of the house. At least on our side, we'll have more power, we'll have more supporters. We also get more of a demand from the society because there are exactly more people, more voters, more people to actually win and be able to demonstrate using radical views if they want that, right? I wish they brought more exclusivity in their case instead of trying too hard strong many our case, but exactly because of that, we are really proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Proper Reply, for that speech, and that marks the end of the debate. Comedy, you can stop recording now. Yeah, this is